Hello everybody, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to discuss about web terminology. Now, what is a website? A website is a collection of related web pages that may contain text, images, audio, and video. And the first page of a website is called as home page. Each website has a specific internet address or the URL that you need to enter in your browser to access a website. Website is hosted on one or more servers and can be accessed by visiting its homepage using a computer network. And a website is managed by its owner, that can be an individual, company, or an organization. Now, websites are of two types: static websites and dynamic website. Now, what is a static website? Static website is the basic type of website that is easy to create. And for this, you don't need any knowledge of web programming and database to create a static website. That is, static websites are coded in HTML. And the codes are fixed for each page, so the information contained in the page does not change and it looks like a printed page. Now, what second one is the dynamic website. What is a dynamic website? Dynamic website is a collection of dynamic web pages whose content changes dynamically. It accesses content from a database or a content management system, CMS. Therefore, when you alter or update the content of the database, then the content of the website is also altered or updated. And dynamic website uses client-side scripting or server-side scripting or both to generate the dynamic content. Client-side scripting generates the content at the client computer on the basis of user input. Then the web browser downloads the web page from the server and processes the code within the page to render the information to the user. In server-side scripting, the software runs on the server and processing is completed in the server. Then plain pages are sent to the user. Now, next one is the HTTP or Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Now, what is HTTP? In a web application environment, the communication between a web browser, that is the client, to the web server is done through the HTTP protocol. HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. HTTP is an application level protocol and it runs on the top of TCP by IP. HTTP protocol is by default a stateless protocol. It is possible to convert the HTTP protocol behavior from stateless to stateful using the session tracking. And the communication between system to system is done by TCP by IP protocol. This is a system level protocol. Now, all of you want to know what is a stateless protocol. If the server does not remember the client or server does not have information about the client, even though the same client is sending the request multiple times, but server does not recognize it and server feels that multiple clients are sending the request, then it is the stateless behavior. Now, what is a stateful protocol? If the server remembers the client for some time period or server is having information about the client, if the client is sending the request multiple times to a server, then server recognizes that all the requests are given by the same client, then it is a stateful behavior. For example, in ATM operations, the server does not remember the PIN number and it's asking for PIN number for each operation. So it is a stateless behavior. For example, in an online shopping, the server remembers the client until the shopping is completed. So it is a stateful behavior. So this is about the HTTP, and the basic characteristics of HTTP are: it is the protocol that allows the web servers and browsers to exchange the data over the web. It is a request to response protocol. It uses the reliable TCP connections by default on TCP port number 80. It is stateless, means each request is considered as a new request. In other words, the server does not recognize the user by default. Now, what are the basic features of HTTP? First is HTTP is media independent. It specifies that any type of media content can be sent by HTTP as long as both the server and the client can handle the data content. and HTTP is connectionless. It is connectionless approach in which HTTP client, that is a browser, initiates the HTTP request, and after the request is done, the client disconnects from server and waits for the response. HTTP is also stateless. The client and server are aware of, as I said just now, the client and server are aware of each other during the current request only. Afterwards, both of them forget each other. Due to the stateless nature of the protocol, neither the client nor the server can retain the information about different requests across the web pages. And the next one is the get and post. Now, what is this get and what is this post? I'll explain some of the differences between get and post. Get is a default method, whereas post is not a default method. And get method can transfer a maximum of 1 kilobyte, that is equal to 1024 bytes at a time from client to the server. So if more than 1 kilobyte of data exists, then remaining data is lost. Whereas post can transfer any amount of data from client to server. There is no limit. So post is suitable to transfer huge amount of data from client to the server. And get appends the form data, that is like email, password, etc. to the URL or the address bar. So that for this reason get is less secure. Whereas post does not append form data to the URL or the address bar. So it is more secure. And get does not support the file uploading, whereas post supports the file uploading. And get is an idempotent method, that is get does not have the capacity to make modifications to the data in the server, whereas post is a non-idempotent method, that is post has the capacity to make the changes to the data in the server. So online examination is example for both get and the post. And what are the features? Uh, okay, these are the differences between get and post. And next is the servlet container. What is a servlet container? Servlet container can also be known as a web container. Now, what is this web container? A web application contains both passive and active web resources. Passive resource is a static resource and it does not need any processing at the server. Whereas active resource is a dynamic resource and it needs some processing at the server. When a client request is given for passive resource like HTML images, then server will receive the request and it handles the request and sends the response back to the client. When a client request is given for dynamic resource like Servlet or JSP, then the server receives the request but it does not handle the request. Instead, the server transfers the request to a mediator called as a web container to handle this request. A web container is a Java application created by a server and it provides the runtime support for dynamic resources like servlets and JSPs. When a client request is given, then the server receives the request and verifies whether this request is given for static or a dynamic resource. If it is given for a static resource, then server handles the request. And if it is given for dynamic, then web container handles that request. Now, what are the advantages of this servlet container or a web container? First is the communication support. That is, in a web application programming, if we want to provide direct communication between server and servlet or JSP, then in the servlet program, we need to write additional network programming like sockets, input output streams, event handling, etc. In a servlet, the programmers include not only the processing logic but also some networking logic. So writing business logic is only burden on the programmer. Adding networking logic increases more burden on the programmer. So in order to avoid this burden, the server has provided a mediator called as a web container. Because of web container, servlet programmer concentrates on the business logic. And the advantage of container is it provides communication support between the server and the servlet. And second one is the life cycle management. Second advantage is the life cycle management. Servlet is a Java class runs at the server side, so programmer cannot create an object. At the server side, the web container will take care about the instantiation, initialization, service, and destroy operations of a servlet. That is, the container maintains the life cycle of a servlet. And the third advantage is the multi-threading. In case of servlet, a single object is created and provides service to multiple clients. And to the multi-threading facility, servlet programmer has to include the business logic and multi-threading logic also. It increases the burden on the servlet programmer again. In order to reduce the burden on the programmer, web container will take care about the multi-threading issues. The container creates a thread for each request and maintains the thread and finally destroys the thread after completion of the request. The container provides multi-threading support to servlet applications. And the next advantage is the security. When an application is running at server side, the data and the logic of that application must be secure. In case of servlets, container provides all the security required. Security provided by the container is called as declarative security. And the web application directory structure is given by the World Wide Web Consortium, that is W3C. The advantage of the following directory structure is the application can be executed on any server, that is, the web application becomes server independent. By the following directory structure, we will get a principle called WODA principle, that is, write once, deploy anywhere. In this directory structure, the root directory is also called as the staging or the public directory. And the name of this directory is user defined, but subdirectories are predefined. For each web application, we need a web.xml file. This is also called as a deployment descriptor file. Deployment is nothing but copying from Java application to the server. That is, deployment is a process of installing a web application into the server. And we have three types of deployment here: hard deployment, console deployment, and tool deployment. What is hard deployment? Hard deployment means copying the root directory of web application into the server directly. Whereas console deployment means creating a WAR or a web archive file for the web application and then deploying the WAR file into the server using the steps given by the server. In real time, we use tool deployment where the tools are responsible for deploying applications into server. What are the tools we are having for deploying into server? We have ANT tool and Maven tool. ANT stands for another name tool. So this is about the servlet container or the web container. And there are two types of servers, web server and application server. Web server contains only web or the servlet container. It can be used for servlets, JSP, struts, JSF, etc. It cannot be used for EJB. And this web server is a computer where the web content can be stored. In general, web server can be used to host the websites, but there are also used some other web servers like FTP, email, storage, gaming, etc. And what are the examples of web servers? We have Apache, Tomcat, and Present. What is application server? Application server contains web and EJB containers. That is, application server is mainly used for EJB. It can be used for servlet, JSP, struts, JSF, EJB also. It is a component-based product that lies in the middle tier of a server-centric architecture. It provides the middleware services for the state maintenance and security, along with the persistence and data access. It is a type of server designed to install, operate, and host the associated services and applications for the IT services, end users, and organizations. Now, what are the examples of application servers? JBoss, it is an open source server from JBoss community. Next is the Glassfish, provided by the Sun Microsystem, now acquired by Oracle. Next is the WebLogic, provided by Oracle. It is more secure. Next is the WebSphere, provided by IBM. Now, what is content type? Content type is also known as MIME. MIME means multi-purpose internet mail extension type. It is a HTTP header that provides the description about what you are sending to the browser. MIME is an internet standard that is used for extending the limited capabilities of email by allowing the insertion of sounds, images, and text in a message. And the features provided by the MIME are it supports the non-ASCII characters, it supports multiple attachments in a single message, it supports the attachment which contains executable audio, images, and video files, etc. It supports the unlimited message length also. So now I'll continue in the next class. Hope you understood.